Can you hear me?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wa sayyidil mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Distinguished Professor Dr. Tamim Usama, Assistant Professor Dr. Nur-Ain, dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessing of Almighty be upon you, and very good afternoon. First and foremost, let's start our session with the recitation of Al-Kitab, Surah Al-Fatiha. Jazakumullahu khairan. I am pleased to welcome you all to the IIMU Book Review Series 1, organized by International Institute for Muslim Unity, IIMU, IIUM.
I am Brother, PhD student at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. It's my pleasure to be a moderator for today's session. Just a minute.
Yeah, I think mute.
Okay. On behalf of the organizing committee, we are grateful for your participation in this virtual event. Is it echo?
Yes, brother, still echo.
Still echo.
No problem. The system is like that.
Okay, on behalf of the organizing committee, we are grateful for your participation in this virtual event via Zoom from various places and around the globe. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we begin, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to Professor Dr. Tamim Usama, the director of IIMU, for graciously delivering our welcoming remarks, and to Assistant Professor Dr. Nur-Ain, Head of Responsible Research and Innovation at IIUM, who will be reviewing today's selected book, Preserving Unity and Avoiding Division, a new approach to the ethics of disagreement in Islam by Dr. Taha J. Al-Alwani. Their insight will be undoubtedly at great value for our session. Without further ado, let's begin our session. I invite Professor Dr. Tamim Usama to deliver the welcoming remarks. Professor, over to you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Respected moderator, Brother Akram Razak, the PhD student at ISTEC. Respected Associate Professor Dr. Nur-Ain Norman, Head of Responsible Research and Innovation Unit, International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, International Islamic University, Malaysia. Dear students, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this opportunity to continue our intellectual activities and discourses organized by International Institute for Muslim Unity, which is under International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. IIMU, which is International Institute for Muslim Unity, has been organizing numerous programs, including IIMU Muslim Unity Series, research undertakings, collaborations, and others. And this is another beginning of IIMU Book Review Series number 1. In order to begin the book review, Dr. Nurul Ain has graciously accepted our invitation, and she will be reviewing a book titled Preserving Unity and Avoiding Division, a new approach to the ethics of disagreement in Islam, authored by Taha J. Al-Alwani, one of the greatest Muslim thinkers of the Muslim world, as well as the founding member of International Institute of Islamic Thought. We know that International Institute of Islamic Thought, known as IIIT, has been in the Muslim world organizing intellectual activities for the past 40 years. And Taha J. Al-Alwani is one of the greatest thinkers as well as the jurists of the 20th century, whose contributions are remarkable in the field of Islamization of human knowledge. Taha J. Al-Alwani had come up with this book, as I said just now, Preserving Unity and Avoiding Division. Indeed, this book is relevant to the IIMU because IIMU is committed to foster Muslim unity across the continents as well as the Muslim world. Before I end my remarks, I welcome the speaker, the participants, the learned audience to this program, and inshallah, we will have book series on a monthly basis, and we strongly believe that you will give us your support and cooperation in organizing our program. Not only this, we also invite you to be a book reviewer in the future programs. We anticipate and solicit your responses in coming up with books that are relevant to our focus area, which is Muslim unity. So the book is a very relevant book, which is talking about preserving unity, and that is the main agenda and focus of IIMU. So with this, let me end my short and brief welcoming remarks, and I just request Brother Akram to really continue. Thank you, Brother Akram.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Tamim Usama, for those thoughtful and inspiring welcoming remarks. Today's book, Preserving Unity and Avoiding Division, offers timely guidance on cultivating harmony within our communities. Dr. Taha J. Al-Alwani, a respected scholar, brings forward essential insights into addressing division with wisdom and comparison. Before we begin the book review, let me briefly introduce our speakers today. Assistant Professor Dr. Nurul Ain Nurman has been a research fellow at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC IIUM, since January 2023, and currently she is holding the position of the head of responsible research and innovation of ISTAC. Previously, she was also a research fellow and was given the responsibility of head of the education, culture and art unit at the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, Malaysia, IAIS, from 2021 to 2022. Dr. Nurul Ain earned her PhD in Islamic Studies, Aqidah and Islamic Thought from University Malaya in 2020, following her master's in Islamic Philosophy from Mofid University, Iran in 2010, and a bachelor's degree in Islamic Philosophy from Firdaus University of Mashhad, Iran in 2005. Her academic excellence was recognized in 2021 with a translation grant from the University of Birmingham for the Global Philosophy of Religion project. Her research interests encompass Islamic and Western philosophy, philosophy of children, philosophy of education, Islamic civilization, multidisciplinary studies, model development, and child development. In addition to her academic pursuit, Dr. Nurul Ain has a wealth of experience in various sectors. She served as a research assistant at the Faculty of Education, University of Malaya, and the University Malaya Family Research and Development Center from 2013 to 2015, and as head of research and publication at Transworld Business Vision and Service Berhad in 2012. Her leadership extended of the hospitality industry, where she was the director of Best Dream Holidays Berhad for 2 consecutive years. Now I would like to invite Assistant Professor Dr. Nurul Ain Nurman, Head of Responsible Research and Innovation at IIUM, to present her review of the book. She will be sharing key themes and insight, laying a strong foundation for our discussion. Thank you. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you very much, Brother Arkam. Do you hear me? Thank you, Brother Arkam, and thank you, IIMU and Professor Tamim, for the warm invitation and the honor to present at the start of this book discussion. I'm the first discussant, and it is truly a privilege to be part of this enriching gathering, bringing together diverse minds to actually share insights and engage in meaningful dialogue. So we first start with this book. Brother Arkam, can you share the PPT? So I've made a PPT here. And this is the book. It's a very nice book, as you see, the book cover. So it's Preserving Unity and Avoiding Division, a New Approach to the Ethics of Disagreement in Islam by Sheikh Taha J Al-Alwani. So the first slide is about, I want to talk a little bit about the book. Okay, so the book is usually people known as the Ethics of Disagreement in Islam. And it addresses the urgent need for unity, not only, the first one, not only within the Muslim Ummah, but also between Muslims and the broader global community. And as we see, today's challenge to Muslim unity reflect the deep diversity within Islam itself, shaped by centuries of varied interpretation, sects, and cultural expressions worldwide. And this diversity raises profound questions. Profound questions like what? How should differences in religious practices and interpretations be respected? Question number one. Question number two that rises is which perspectives hold authority within the faith? And question number three, how can the Muslim community honor its shared values while respecting regional and cultural uniqueness? And these questions fueled both historical events and the modern day complexity often lead to debates over what it means to be part of a unified Muslim ummah. And we see political divisions and the pressures of modernity and external geopolitical forces have only amplified these differences and often fueling disunity. And yet, Sheikh Al-Alwani's call to focus on Maqasid Sharia aligns with scholars like Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qardawi and Jasir Auda, who also promotes unity by emphasizing shared goal of justice, compassion, and welfare. So by advocating for a contextualized, purpose-driven approach to Islamic teachings, Sheikh Al-Alwani offers a path forward, one that respects tradition while engaging with contemporary realities. Okay, so in discussing, this is my opinion actually. Maybe I'll add a little bit, yeah, before we start. So my opinion, it's also helpful to recognize that differences are indeed essential to our understanding and appreciation of the world. So a perspective that actually complements Al-Alwani's work. So we think about this, without contrast, without diversity, without contrast, we'd lose perspective. All right. So just at sweetness, how we understand sweet and bitterness, to fully appreciate vice versa. Okay, I mean here is that sweetness cannot be understood without bitterness, and neither bitter is. And if everything is sweet, how can we even define sweet itself and understand its own essence? So it comes to various things, in diversity. So we understand things by diversity. And what Sheikh Al-Alwani is bringing in this book is the ethics of disagreement, which calls for unity, but also a universal guide for ethical engagement. And his vision offers a blueprint for both Muslims and non-Muslims. Okay, this slide, sorry, the first one, Brother Arqam, before this. Okay, so about the author. So Al-Alwani, he was born in 1935 in Iraq, and he pursued his education in Al-Azhar University. So most of his education, I mean, all of his education is from bachelor, master's, and doctor in Usul Fiqh. He got it all by 1973, and he briefly served in Iraq's military reserve. So he taught in the military academy in Baghdad, and later he was a professor in the College of Islamic Studies. Okay, and afterward, he taught at Imam Muhammad ibn Saud University in Saudi Arabia, as we see here. And in 1983, he moved to the US, where he focused on interfaith studies, particularly on Jewish history and the legacy of Rabbi Yohanan bin Zakkai. And he was the first Islamic scholar to actually hold a chair at the Washington Theological Consortium. And his work mostly emphasized on moderate Islamic scholarship and included advocating against apostasy punishment. All right, the next stage is the one before. Okay, okay, this one. I would like to read how, because we want to actually analyze the book. So let's read how Jabir Al-Alwani's thought is, so that we can understand the book. Okay, as we see now, to understand Taha Jabir Al-Alwani's thought, is we should explore his profound commitment to unity within Muslim community. So how he did that his scholarship, he actually reimagines the core Islamic principles in Usul Fiqh, in Maqasid Sharia, in Ijtihad, and also something by the name of Fiqh al-Aqaliyat. And he approaches these traditional Islamic principles with fresh insights, okay, adapting their application to meet the complex needs of the contemporary Muslim society. And he sees this as a living frameworks that that could be thoughtfully interpreted to address current challenges and foster unity. So first, as we see here, usul fiqh, how he look. Why did Al-Alwani look into? I mean, he uses this usul fiqh within all explaining the book. Okay, his grounded his what do you call it, his knowledge on usul fiqh shape his understanding of jurisprudence, and he sees this as more than a rigid set of rules. Okay, so he sees it as a living dynamic discipline aimed at serving the community needs. All right, and he understood that as the need for unity in approaching Islamic rules, and he emphasized an ethical foundation that transcends mere legal technicalities. Okay, and that helped him, and that's a very, very beautiful thing of how he approached usul fiqh. So he just sees it as he sees Sharia as a compassionate and adaptable legal framework rather than one that divides over technicality agreements. Okay, number two, he looks at maqasid Sharia. How he looks at maqasid Sharia? He explores maqasid Sharia and deepens his commitment to unity by centering on the higher purposes of Islamic law, such as justice, such as mercy, and such as welfare. And so he argued that focusing on maqasid would prevent the community from being entangled in overly literal or divisive interpretations. So that actually helps Muslims to see the bigger picture of Sharia's objective. And this impacts on the unity. And this is very deep because he not merely talking about adherence to the law, but about fulfilling the ethical and spiritual goals that actually binds the community together. Okay, number three, on how he looks, I mean, why he stresses on ijtihad, that ijtihad is independent reasoning. So Al-Alwani, he recognized ijtihad as an essential tool for actually contextualizing Islamic teachings in the modern world. And he, by advocating for independent reasoning, he encouraged actually Muslims to engage with their faith actively and thoughtfully rather than being passively following inherited interpretations. And this approach fosters a very, very dynamic, relevant Islam that addresses current realities. And by promoting this intellectual unity, you see, he unites us with intellectuality. He encourages diverse voices within Islamic scholarship, and his approach showed that Islam could actually embrace multiple perspectives while maintaining a coherent and unified purpose. So what he says, what I should stress here, the keyword is unity through intellectuality. Okay, number four, what he proposed, what he introduced, sorry, the one before is fiqh al-aqaliyat. Fiqh al-aqaliyat is the meaning of jurisprudence for Muslim minorities. And he developed this fiqh al-aqaliyat. He addressed that practical needs of Muslim living in non-Muslim societies. He provided guidance on how Muslims can uphold their faith with foreign legal and cultural frameworks, actually balancing Islamic values with local context. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we see here, let me see what I look. Oh, and the number one got up. Okay, so the contents of the book is actually, let me see, what is this? Oh, okay, this is chapter number one. Okay, we'll just look through at the chapters. So chapter number one is talking about the synopsis of ethics of disagreement. So there will be, you see the key points down there. They were talking about acceptable and unacceptable disagreements. He also talks about the historical context and the causes and the consequences of disagreements. Okay, next. Chapter number two, he talks about the ethics of disagreement. This is what he actually proposes and introduces in Islam. And actually, well, I will elaborate more, just look through. The key points is he highlighted on the unity of humankind. He highlighted on the challenges to unity and scholastic theology. Number three, chapter three. Next, Brother Arkham. This is chapter number 3, scholastic theology and the division of the Muslim unity. He really he analyzes scholastic theology, and he looks at the origins and the problems and the what do you call it? The problems that comes from scholastic theology. Okay, chapter number 4, he formulates a new scholastic theology, and he introduces transcendent awareness, a new scholastic theology that is based on transcendent awareness and also comparative insights. Chapter number 5, he's talking about differences of variety, not contradictions. This is actually a principle of his ethics on disagreement. So he values plurality and also the components of unity. Okay, chapter number 6. In his book, he introduces a blueprint for convenient among Muslim movements, and that the key points are governance principles and actually an ummah model. Okay, we'll analyze chapter by chapter. Okay, so the conclusion, actually, he reinforces the importance of ethical disagreement. Okay, chapter number 1. This one I wrote in Canva, actually, so when we download, it's overlapping. Okay, chapter number 1, a synopsis of the ethics. Okay, so we will see chapter number 1, what he spoke about in chapter number 1. So we'll discuss chapter by chapter. Okay, what he introduces, as we see here, he introduces readers to a central theme of his work, and that is what we know, what is known as the ethics of disagreement, or in Arabic is called adab al-ikhtilaf within Islam. And he emphasizes that disagreement is actually an inherent part of human diversity. Okay, humans are born or created with diversity. Okay, it's an inherent part. Okay, we cannot detach something that is already inherent with them, and that when approached ethically, all right, we should approach it ethically. It can be constructive rather than divisive. And this chapter actually sets the stage for outlining the historical background and underlying principles that can guide Muslims in managing differences respectfully. And okay, what he says here in chapter number 1 is, when is disagreement acceptable and when is it not? So he says, he begins by actually drawing a distinction between what is acceptable and unacceptable forms of disagreement. And what he says is, acceptable disagreements is, he argues that acceptable disagreement is one that arises from sincere intellectual inquiry and genuine differences in understanding. And what is unacceptable disagreement is driven by ego, is driven by factionalism and or the desire of dominance. All right. So, and he stresses that not all disagreements are harmful. And by framing certain types of disagreements as constructive, he encourages an open intellectual environment within Islamic scholarship. And this perspective is crucial for fostering unity, as it promotes actual respect for diversity in thought while discouraging divisive motive. And number 2, he speaks within this chapter number 1 is the history of disagreements within the Muslim community. And he traces that historical roots of disagreements in the early Muslim community. He examines how figures like the Prophet's companions handled differences, and he actually illustrates that early Muslims practiced disagreement ethically with mutual respect and saw it as a natural part of community life. All right. He doesn't see it as something that is separate from human beings. All right. We see as how we are born differently, so we have the differences inherited within ourselves. And this historical context provides a model for Muslims today, showing that disagreements were managed without causing fragmentation. And when he talks about that within the chapter number 1, he also explains how the differences among our Sunni our four leading Sunni imams, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and their unique approaches to Islamic jurisprudence, and each had distinct methods for interpreting the Quran and Sunnah, leading to different legal rulings. But this one, he says that it portrays that these differences are healthy. It encourages modern readers to view jurisprudential diversity as a strength rather than a source of division. And this reinforces his argument that diversity, when approached ethically, enriches Islamic thought. Number 4, he talks about the causes underlying juristic disagreements, and he says that he identifies specific causes behind juristic disagreements, such as variations in linguistic interpretations, as differences in assessing the reliability of hadith, and the distinct methods of legal reasoning. All these, he says that these causes are often rooted in inherent complexity of interpreting divine guidance. And what we can see here is that these disagreements are healthy, and and we can see it as fostering empathy rather than judgment. And we see that the sincere attempts are to understand divine guidance, not personal or ideological conflicts. Okay. Number 5, he speaks about disagreements among the leading imams. Okay, he's saying that these leading imams manage their differences respectfully, maintaining mutual respect and refraining from harsh criticisms of each other's rulings. And by this is a scholarly environment that upholds the unity despite intellectual differences. Okay, and then he speaks about also the last thing that he speaks. Chapter 1 is a bit extensive. He speaks about ijtihad. When ijtihad is declined, he say a rigid adherence to established schools of thought increase. So ijtihad decline, what? The rigid adherence to established schools of thought increased. And this leads to a less dynamic and more divisive environment within Islamic scholarship, causing a shift from constructive disagreement to actually factionalism. Factionalism is something, they're like subgroups that actually they are only supporting, or they're only defending their sects or their groups. All right, that's what you call factionalism. And ijtihad, which he sees as a tool to maintain a flexible, adaptable approach to Islamic jurisprudence. And by advocating for a revival of ijtihad, Al-Alwani, he emphasized that there's a need for intellectual freedom, and there's a need for intellectual adaptability, which he sees as critical for unity in the modern world. Okay, the next slide. All right. Oh God. Oh my God. This. All right. I hope you can read it. Okay, because I'm actually a philosopher, so I read things. I take out these facts coming, bringing it into premises and conclusion. So there are several premises that can be taken out from his chapter number 1. So he sees that intentions behind disagreements matter, intentions, and he sees that ego and power corrupt the purpose of disagreement. He also sees that the purpose of disagreement in Islam is to serve the community, and he also sees that ethical disagreements encourages intellectual and spiritual growth. And as we can see here, this is premise number 1. So he's can you go to the next slide? Okay, we'll go back. As we see the premises, we go back to his thoughts. Okay, so we see that his writing through his thoughts, we read it together, and Usul Fiqh actually provides a methodological foundation that allows for diversity in interpretation. And he ensures that disagreements can occur within a shared ethical framework. And this aligns with the first premise. As I said, usul al-fiqh encourages sincere inquiry by providing tools for thoughtful interpretations rather than factional adherence to a single interpretation. And maqasid sharia, as we can see now, as from the chapter 1, embodies that Al-Alwani's belief that the purpose of Islamic law is to achieve the higher purposes, that is to achieve justice, to achieve mercy and communal welfare. And this is aligned with the premise number 1, which I showed you, focusing on the higher ethical objective of law, which guides sincere and constructive disagreements. And these disagreements aim to uphold these higher objectives, and they're in line with maqasid, creating space for diverse viewpoints that serve for the common good. And number 3, ijtihad, as we see, encourages Muslims to actively engage with Islamic teachings and apply them thoughtfully to modern contexts. And this allows individuals to actually explore and interpret Islam according to their unique circumstances while maintaining ethical intentions. Next slide. So chapter number 2, he speaks about, next slide, Brother Arqam. Okay, chapter number 2, he talks about the ethics of disagreements in Islam. This is, what he actually introduces. This is what called Adab al-Ikhtilaf. And in chapter number 2, he delves into the concept of unity within Islam. What he means by the concept of unity of Islam, he focuses on the ethical dimensions of disagreement. And as we see, we always negatively look at disagreements, but actually, if we what matters is how we manage it. And because disagreements are natural, as he says it is inevitable, therefore does not demand uniformity in thought, rather it calls for a harmony. Something that is natural does not demand uniformity, but what it calls for harmony, which aligns with what? With the unity of Tawheed. If we look, Tawheed, the principle of oneness, which is a foundational concept that applies not only to the belief in the oneness of God, but also to the social and the moral fabric of the Muslim community, that allows for variety while upholding shared core principles. And what he speaks in chapter number 2, number 1, he speaks about humankind as a unity. And in Islamic thought, this is foundational. Thoughts need to be managed constructively to promote harmony rather than division. So Al-Alwani, he begins by discussing the concepts of humankind as a unified whole. And he emphasizes that the Quran teaches that all humankinds are created with a shared purpose and an inherent dignity. And this is the central teachings of Islam, which encourages compassion, which encourages understanding, and which also encourages cooperation among people. And by this, actually, Al-Alwani sets an inclusive framework that applies to Muslims and also non-Muslims alike. And this approach reflects his belief that Islam's ethical principles can foster unity across humanity. And it also reinforces his commitment to also viewing differences as a natural and valuable, as I said, and it contributes to the richness of human understanding and experience. I repeat again. And from Tawheed, he goes to humankind. As we see that now, he talks about humankind and he goes to what now is called revelation. And what he says about revelation, he says that the progress nature of the divine discourse. Okay, so divine discourse is revelation. It has a progressive nature. All right, so the revelations in the Quran is a progressive in nature, and it provides guidance suited to humanity's evolving understanding and social context. And what do we understand by this? He says that the guidance of the Quran is timeless. It goes beyond time. And that's why it's progressive in its nature. It provides guidance suited to humanity's evolving understanding, okay, and also the social context. And this progressive discourse is intended to guide humans gradually towards the ultimate values of justice, mercy, and peace. And you see how he connects between usul fiqh and maqasid and ijtihad. So the analysis here are Islamic teachings its values are adaptable and encouraging Muslims to understand the Quran in a way that is relevant to their specific time and place. So when you read Quran, you do not just read it. You are not a passive reader. You read through your mind, you understand it, and you adapt it. And this insight supports a vision of unity that is flexible, that is resilient, and capable of embracing change without compromising core values. And what he speaks in chapter number 2 also is the weakness of sets in. Okay, what he means here is that human deviates from the nature of themselves and the nature of a timeless guidance, which here he refers to the Holy Quran. And by what? By not managing well disagreements, by not ethically disagreeing. Yeah, we need to agree and disagree together. Okay, so he discusses that how historically Muslims began to lose this sense of progressive. Okay, why are you moving to imperfection? He's saying, as Rumi says, why crawl when you have wings to fly? And these weaknesses included intellectual stagnation, rigid interpretations of Islamic texts, and also the rise of sectarianism, which began to fragment the Muslims community. And this actually was further discussed by Dr. Murad Hoffman in his book, The Muslim Mind, okay, first published in 1997. So Dr. Murad Hoffman is a mu'allaf, and he understood that there is a challenge, that Muslim facts that you do not realize, or eyes wide open maybe, but heart blinded. But he understood that the challenge of the Muslims world today, the contemporary Muslims, are intellectual stagnation, identity crisis, educational deficiencies, political fragmentation, and also the moral and ethical decline. And if you want to go a little back, look at the books of also Jamaluddin Al-Afghani, for instance, and which supports Al-Alwani. His book on refutation of the materialists, what is Al-Rad al-Dahriyin. So actually he defends the role of religion and encourages Muslims to engage with modern science. Okay, and also his book on the truth about the Nari sect, or you call it Nechari sect, and also publications like Al-Urwa Al-Wuthqa, where he and Muhammad Abdu promoted intellectual renewal. And we'll go back to, Al-Alwani. The section of this book, he serves as a cautionary account of what happens when the ethical framework for disagreement is neglected. And what happens, what is the aftermath of this? That Muslims lose insight of their higher purpose of unity, and their disagreements become divisive, leading to a fragmented community. And number 4, he speaks about scholastic theology. Scholastic theology is in Kalam, it spawns a growing sectarianism. Okay, so he examines the role of Kalam in creating division within the Muslim community. Okay, he argues that Kalam is initially developed as a method of theological discourse, but then gradually becomes a source of sectarianism. As scholars, what they do is rigidly adhere to the particular schools. And he speaks more in the coming chapter, which I will explain. But from this, he critiques and he reflects his concern with factionalism, as he views the rise of rigid theological positions as a primary source of disunity and deviate from Islamic's ethical purpose. And by highlighting this shift, he calls for a theological approach that centers on unity and inclusivity, as we will see in the coming chapter. Next slide. In chapter number 3, Oh, okay. This, as we see the themes, okay, he spoke about unity as a foundational principle, and he also talks about the adaptability of Islamic teachings and the dangers of intellectual stagnation and sectarianism. All right. Chapter number 3, he speaks about scholastic theology, which is kalam, and the division of the Muslim community. Okay, so don't get him wrong here, yo. He is not judging. He is a scholar, and thus he analyzes the root cause of division. Thus he criticizes with his own arguments. Okay, so Al-Alwani argues that the methodologies and the debates within Ilm al-Kalam led to factionalism, diverting the focus from unity and mutual respect to ideological rivalry, and shifted theological discourse from a tool of understanding to one of the division. In some way, which I read, he is saying that it is not important of who wins, who is right or wrong, or the important is that love should win, compassion should win, unity should win, and we should embrace the differences. And Kalam became increasingly divisive as it solidified into rigid schools of thought. And this is what he said. So what he spoke is the key sections of what he spoke is, number one is the inception of scholastic theology. And he began by exploring the origins of Kalam as a method of defending Islamic beliefs against external challenges, such as Greek philosophy and other religious doctrines. So Muslim scholars originally developed Kalam to address complex questions, regarding the divine attributes, free will, predestination, and then aiming to strengthen Islamic beliefs. Sorry, it's the one before. The slide before. No, we're still at chapter number 3. All right. Okay. So he see that this early use of a kalam was actually overshadowed, and it become increasingly focused on technical debates. And this is what he said: when you overshadow it, and then something else become increasingly focused, the technical debates, and it actually undermine its unifying potential. And he looks more into the methodological problem in Kalam, and he critiques that the methodologies used in Kalam, arguing that its speculative nature led scholars to focus more on abstract debates than on ethical teachings. And he highlights issues such as the reliance on philosophical reasoning over Quranic and Sunnah-based interpretations, which resulted in interpretations that often deviated from the foundational source of Islam. And I might want to add to a point here, as a philosopher, of course, and a Muslim philosopher, I would say yes, Islamic philosophy has traditionally been a tool for understanding, not a replacement for divine revelation. And thus, philosophical reasoning should ideally support, or should clarify, or should contextualize the Quranic and Sunnah teachings without overshadowing them. And by keeping philosophy as a complementary tool rather than the primary method, which some use, scholars can ensure that interpretations remain faithful to Islam's essence. And thus philosophy is indeed beneficial within certain boundaries. Like you say, A is B, B is C, and thus A is C. And logic, logic is a formula of the mind, like mathematics, yes. However, let's make this clear. The primarily allegiance of Islamic interpretation should remain with the Quran and the Sunnah, ensuring that interpretations uphold the authenticity, or the consistency and the integrity of Islamic teachings across and generations. And this is what Sheikh Al-Alwani did. He was right. Al-Alwani is concerned with a shift from divine revelation to speculative reasoning in kalam, disconnected from the ethical and spiritual objectives of Islam. So this is the aftermath of kalam, and it's not the fault of the discipline, it's the fault of human beings, which they see when they rely on the abstract reasoning contributed to intellectual elitism and dogmatism. So did they distance themselves, the theological discourse, from the common Muslims' lived experience, and creating unnecessary barriers within the community. So As I said, who is wrong? Human beings wrong, not the discipline itself. So what we can do is to control people. We can't. What we can do to control people, because we cannot control disciplines. Discipline, it is as it is. He says that the root of factionalism needs to be avoided. He didn't say it's haram, but it is to be avoided in order to secure harmony. Okay, and he speaks within chapter number 3, he speaks also the rise of sectarianism through theological schools. He sees that schools of thought such as Mu'tazilats, Asharats, and Maturidis competed for dominance, and theological disagreements became points of identity, leading to factionalism and even hostility within the Muslim Ummah. And the sectarianism contradicts it. He says that it's contradictory with the Quranic vision of unity, as it places allegiance to theological positions above the broader unity of the Ummah. And Al-Alwani critics, and he implies that while theological diversity is natural, rigid sectarian boundaries turn healthy differences into divisive identities, undermining the principles of mutual respect and compassion. And the last point he was speaking in this chapter was the shift from unity to dogma, as what I said, okay, with strict adherence to specific schools, environment where theological positions become rigid, with little room for open dialogue. It gives a little room for open dialogue or differing interpretations. And this transition stifled the Ummah's ability to engage constructively with internal diversity, creating a culture of division rather than a culture of understanding. Okay, next slide. In chapter number 4, okay, he speaks about formulation of new scholastic theology. Okay. In this chapter, he proposes a renewed approach to Kalam. Okay, and that would foster unity within the Muslim community. And he focuses on a Quran-centered, ethical, and spiritually aware methodology. All right, he does not want us to do the jadal. He doesn't want us to do the debate, but what? Quran-centered, because Quran is timeless. It's a guidance for us. It does not know time. It goes beyond time. That's why he uses the methodology, and he says that this is moving from the traditional approach of Kalam for being overly technical and factional and leading to division. He said he envisions he gives a fresh breath to it, and he says envisions a new scholastic theology rooted in divine awareness, one that harmonizes intellectual discourse with spiritual and ethical objectives. And what does he speak about? Number 1, he speaks about a methodology that he says that is based on transcendent awareness. And he introduced the idea of transcendent awareness as a foundation for his new approach to Kalam. And he suggests that theology should begin with a deep spirituality-oriented consciousness of God's presence and attributes. Tawheed. Okay, and this awareness would serve as an anchor, ensuring that theological discussions remain grounded in reverence, in humility, and a sense of purpose aligned with God's will. Okay, we can understand here, if we focus on God, everything becomes compassion, everything is become unified, everything becomes with reverence and sense of purpose. But when we go to human or the sense of ego, as he says, so it becomes divisive, because you only see the thing good for a group or for human. Okay. Okay, so when shifting from intellectualized and technical nature of tradition, what happens? Move towards a spiritual grounded approach, and then theology becomes a source of personal growth and ethical conduct, not just abstract knowledge. And what he speaks about in the chapter also, what chapter number 4? Okay, he speaks about formulating a discourse based on Quranic scholastic theology, and I've mentioned that he advocates for a theology that directly roots in the Quranic rather than in speculative philosophy. And he emphasized that the Quran offers a comprehensive worldview that addresses both spiritual and intellectual needs, making it suitable basis for theological inquiry. And by grounding scholastic theology in the Quran, Al-Alwani believes that the Muslim can foster a common language and understanding that is inherently unifying. It's very beautiful. And he suggests that grounding theology in the Quran prevents unnecessary speculations and keep discussions relevant to the core teachings of Islam. And what he says is that, it will come back to the niyyah and the intention of the scholar. Okay. Okay. As a philosopher again, okay, how we use philosophy, and we use the lens, okay, how we see philosophy, okay, whether to see philosophy as a task of applying philosophy as completing or clarifying what is already embedded in the Quran, or as a tool, seeing it as a tool to unpack the deeper meaning within its verses, and in this light will become interpretive one, facilitating deeper understanding and coherence within the Quranic framework, or you use philosophy with the niyyah of identifying the truth, and thus the truth and false cannot be differentiated between truth or false. But still, the objective of philosophy, as we see, is to identify the truth, and thus truth. In philosophy, we say that truth and false cannot be at one place. All right. So a question also remains: should we discard kalam? And Al-Alwani answers this. In response, he says that one possible compromise is a restrained and Quran-rooted kalam, one that uses theological inquiry only to clarify and reinforce what the Quran teaches, avoiding speculative or divisive topics. And this could allow Muslims to retain a tradition of theological reflection while emphasizing unity. And his approach, he sees that it can achieve a balance, respecting the depth that Kalam brings to Islamic thought without allowing it to undermine unity or to overstep the Quran's guidance. Quran is always number one. This is what Al-Alwani says, okay? And it's very true. Okay, number 3 is that what he says is scholastic theology, because he also studied Jewish religion. So he actually went through the approaches of the Jewish and the Christians, and he says that these traditions also experience periods of fragmentation due to overly complex theological debates. Brother Arkam, do I have some more time? I can't hear you.
Yes, Doctor, the 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. So he uses the comparison to argue that Islam should avoid similar pitfalls by developing a theology that is inclusive. He says grounded in divine revelation and adaptable to the community needs. And Al-Alwani's comparative approach highlights the universality of certain theological challenges, such as the risk of division through rigid doctrinal positions, as I mentioned before. All right. So maybe we can look at my answer is a central challenges arises. Can a less speculative, more inclusive approach succeed in distinguishing truth without significant differentiation? And Al-Alwani, he answers this. He seems to believe that by anchoring theology in the Quran, Muslims can find sufficient guidance to identity, core, truth, without resorting to the often divisive methods found in speculative theology. And according to his view, truth is accessible through the Quran itself. And the role of theology, would be to eliminate and clarify the meanings of already present, meanings that already presents, rather than to actually dissect or to theorize beyond the text. All right. So another aspect that he talks about is Islamic scholastic theology and its legacy. So he acknowledges both the achievements and the limitations of Kalam, and he honors the contributions of the past scholars, but he says that it should be free from the divisive elements that characterize earlier schools, and he presents a balanced view that respects Islamic intellectual heritage while advocating for reform. He says you can't stay in one point. If you stay in one point, then you are not progressive. You cannot find a solution for problems that runs so much. I mean, runs beyond the pace today without reforming something new, giving new insight with the ijtihad and looking into something that is upholds the core reality. And he suggests that the past theological discourse should be appreciated, but not idolize. Instead, it should be reformed to serve the current needs of the Muslim Ummah, and this approach supports his vision of a unified Muslim community, as it encourages Muslims to actually draw on their shared heritage while remaining adaptable and open to change. And also, he spoke about the awareness of Quranic authority among the various Islamic schools of thought. And he says that in this chapter, he emphasized the importance of recognizing the Quran's authority. He's bringing that, okay, you're deviating from something we have here from the very beginning, and then you don't see it as a unifying force among Islamic schools of thought. And he argues that Quran provides a common ground that can bridge theological differences, encouraging scholars to prioritize Quranic guidance over factional doctrines. Okay, he's not saying that, everything should be one. You see, that ideology of pluralistic religions. No, he's not seeing this. He's saying that there are common grounds that should be stressed upon when you start to debate and you start to support only yours is right without actually thinking about the others. Then it creates a black, I don't know, ink, a black, what do you call it, black light in your heart, without even looking at thinking to harmonize. We should live in harmony, as what Quran has said. And the path to unity lies in a shared foundation. By returning to the Quran as a central authority, Al-Alwani, what he does, envisions a form of theology that transcends sectarian boundaries, fostering a cohesive, inclusive understanding of Islam. And this approach respects diversity, but ultimately serves the unity and spiritual growth of the Ummah. Chapter 5. He speaks about differences of variety, not differences of contradictions. And in this chapter 5, he speaks about the variety of interpretation and practice that should be seen as a strength rather than a contradiction. Okay, so it explores how Islam accommodates diversity. Okay, Islam accommodates diversity, emphasizing that the differences of opinion, differences of mythologies, and different cultural expressions are part of a healthy, thriving community rather than a source of division. And he asserts that such differences should not be viewed as oppositional or divisive. Rather, they reflect the richness of Islamic thought and practice. And this chapter actually presents a vision of unity that embraces diversity, where the focus is on shared values and ethical engagement. So he says that variety and plurality do not diminish unity, all right? And he also speaks about the components of unity and peacemaking among Muslims. He says that this approach aligns with the concept of adab al-ikhtilaf, which encourages respectful and thoughtful engagement. He outlines key components necessary for unity and peace. What he says include mutual respect, empathy, and focus on shared goals. And he argues that these elements create a culture well, differences are managed constructively. As I said, it's the way you manage, how you foster peace and cohesion rather than conflict. Okay, and he also stresses that prayer is important, a prayer as a unifying practice. Okay, we rarely see the philosophy behind a prayer of how it actually unifies everything. You know, even our life actually starts from prayer. And how you pray is actually portraying you. And he discusses the role of communal prayer as a powerful unifying force within Islam, despite differences in interpretation and methodology and prayer, that worshiping to Allah, bringing your head in the form of prostration or sujud brings Muslims together in shared worship, reinforcing a collective identity that transcends individual differences. All right. And he talks also about academic exchange as a unifying factor. And he argues that scholarly exchange and open dialogue among Muslim scholars is another important avenue for fostering unity. And he encourages an academic environment where actually scholars feel free to share different perspective as long as this exchange is rooted in mutual respect and a commitment to the unity's welfare. And he goes back, I said, to the maqasid al-sharia, all right? And you must be respect and you must be respectful, all right? And he also speaks about unified authority and its impact on the academic and doctoral heritage. And he concludes that the chapter by discussing the importance of a unified, respected authority within the Muslim community. And he suggests that a central authority grounded in Islamic principles could provide guidance on doctrinal issues, also helping to manage disagreements constructively and also prevent divisive conflicts. Okay, so chapter number 6 is the end. At the end, he introduces a blueprint for a covenant among Islamic movements, and he outlines a proposal for unifying various Islamic movements by creating a covenant based on shared principles and ethical foundation. And he critiques the fragmentation within the Muslim community caused by differing ideologies and political visions. And he argues that unity is essential for Muslims to fulfill their collective responsibility. And he emphasized that a covenant among Islamic movements should not mean uniformity, but rather a commitment to shared values, to cooperative governance, and a common understanding of Islamic principles. And through this covenant, he envisions a model where Muslims, where Muslim movements can work together while respecting their diversity. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Nurul Ain, for the insightful review and for highlighting such a valuable aspects of the book. Based on the review and based on my reading of the book, Dr. Taha J Al-Alwani offers a thought-provoking approach to handling disagreement within the Islamic community. He emphasized the need to rediscover the early Islamic practices of respectful and constructive disagreement. He argues that disagreement, when managed with wisdom and ethics, can foster healthy exchange of ideas and strengthen the community. However, historical conflicts over theology and jurisprudence have often led to lasting division, overshadowing the broader goal of unity and the advancement of Muslim civilization. Through examples from early Muslim scholars, Dr. Al-Alwani encouraged modern Muslims to revive a spirit of tolerance and understanding. He outlines the roots of disagreement in the Muslim world, noting that when the community abandoned independent reasoning, it's mean ijtihad, it led to an era dominated by imitation and unproductive divisions. By focusing on respectful discourse and prioritizing shared values, Dr. Alwani believes that Muslims can build stronger, more unified communities that embrace intellectual diversity. The book advocates for a renewed ethics of disagreement, reminding readers of the principles that allowed early Muslims to navigate differences while remaining unified. It calls for contemporary Muslims to address disagreements thoughtfully with a focus on shared goals and understanding. By revisiting the principles, preserving unity and avoiding division seeks to provide a pathway toward a more cohesive, resilient Muslim community. Thank you once again, Doctor. I will open the floor for the only 2 questions or comments from the participants. Please keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking. If anyone wants to share any comments or any question, only 2 persons we are allowing. I think there is no comments or questions.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Adam, yes.
Yeah, I just have one. I just want currently. Yeah, Adam Musa, my name. Currently, when you talk of fatwa globally, there is a very big trend that individual fatwas nowadays are not so much followed, but they use block fatwa. Did he also look at that? Thank you.
I don't understand your question, brother.
I'm saying currently the fatwa, long time it used to be individual, and we saw a lot of problems associated with individual fatwa. It led to disunity, a lot of it. But currently, if you see in Europe, if you go in Saudi Arabia, if you go in Africa, you find them in blocks. The muftis, they come together. Did he suggest anything to do with the group preference over the individual?
Oh, I can't answer that. I'm sorry. I look into the book, but in these things, I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe you have to refer to Professor Jasser Auda or others that are more, into this. Yeah.
Okay, anyone wants to share something or any questions? Okay, I think no. Okay, then Alhamdulillah, we have reached the end of the session. And finally, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Tamim, Director of IIMU, for the closing remark.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nurul Ain, for your excellent and remarkable presentation. Indeed, the book review was very systematic and it has been very helpful. And for those who have not read the book, will now start reading the book because you have given them a food that will really stimulate them to read this book. And for this, IIMU International Institute for Muslim Unity is very much thankful to you for your book review. At the same time, we also thank the participants, the audience from different parts of the Muslim world for their participation. And we are very happy that you are always cooperating and supporting the programs organized by IIMU as well as ISTAC as well as International Islamic University faculties and institutes. We continue to have such programs in the future, and we seek your full cooperation by not only following and participating and giving feedback, but also coming forward for presenting your thoughts, for making book reviews, and also taking part in our series of discourses in the near future. With this, I thank Dr. Nurul Ain once again and my colleagues who are on the Zoom as well as who are with me in the hall. And thank you all very much. Wabillahi tawfiq wal hidayah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Back to our chairman.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Dr. Tamim Usama, for the closing remark. As we come to a close, on behalf of the IIMU and organizing committee, I would like to express my gratitude to our speaker, Assistant Professor Dr. Nurul Ain Nurman, and Professor Dr. Tamim Usama for your invaluable contribution to this session, and all of you for your active participation. The insights shared today have truly enriched our understanding, and I hope this discussion inspires us to put unity into practice in meaningful ways.